you guys want a shot at winning a copy of Call of Duty World War II for the console of your choice for absolutely free, a couple of my friends and I are doing a little giveaway. Link is down there in the description below. Go check it out if you're interested. In just a little over 2 weeks' time, Black Ops 3 will no longer be what you're hearing from a lot of YouTubers' tongues, and thus, I figured let's take a look back at some cool things that you might not have caught or may have never known about Black Ops 3. So, with time dwindling down on when we could take a look at Black Ops 3 and some things there within, I figured we'd take the time today to talk about 13 things that were different 2 years ago in Black Ops 3. Once again, you may know some of these, you may not, but of course, we're just here to give you guys a little bit of a list on some cool things that were completely different back then. So hopefully you guys enjoy. If you guys want to keep score following along, feel free to let me know down there in the comment section down below how many of these you ended up knowing or how many completely took you by surprise. So that said, let's jump right into the list here, talking about these 13 things that were different 2 years ago and what you may have remembered or may not have remembered at the very start of Black Ops 3. So that said, let's talk firstly about a little bit of a specialist ability, one that really fired up the opinions of a lot of people within the community, and the pub stomping community in general was one that was really affected by this, but that being Rejack. This is one in which what we know of now is it counts as a death, it puts you right back up into the action, but your streak is effectively cut off. It's basically like you died, so it does make sense. But in the beta, it was a little bit different here, because if you were using Rejack, the thing that was a little bit different was that streaks would keep going. So therefore, you could end up having still that kill streak going, that score streak, whatever it is you're working towards. And in the case of, say, Nuclears, it didn't cut off there even though you were effectively killed in-game. So Rejack had some really weird quirks about it, and I think it only lasted about a couple of days here out of that playtime, but still nonetheless at the launch we saw it fixed, but only in that beta we ended up seeing that there were no score streak or kill streak cutoffs for it. So that said, that moves us into the second thing you might not initially remember, and a lot of you guys actually probably did not get hands-on experience with this one, but in the earlier alpha builds of the game, flags were actually in the domination game mode. Whereas we had just the zones in which you could capture, flagless zones of domination and other things like that, there actually were flags to indicate A, B, and C flag in domination. We can see this actually in the multiplayer reveal trailer because that was the alpha build of the game. For whatever reason though, they were taken out and not even replaced with anything, just completely left out. So therefore zones took over as the air quote capture points instead of flags. Now what we talk about next, you guys actually might remember some of these because I know for a fact one of these was accessible to the public in the beta, one was available if you played around with the game code in the PC beta, and then one was in the alpha version, but this deals with different weapon names from what we see now in Black Ops 3 to the earlier prior versions of Black Ops 3. So let's start out with the earliest one. The LCAR was actually named the Spider, and that's one that I think only made it to the alpha version of the game. I can't remember off the top of my head if it was in the beta, but the ones that were in the beta though were the KN-44 and the SVG-100. The KN-44, of course, was that weapon that was available to everybody via the regular playstyle of game. You didn't have to do anything special for it, but it was known as the ARC-7. And that's one that a lot of people still probably remember to this day, but one that was a little bit different and a little bit harder to see was one called the Powerbolt, which again is the SVG-100. But if you guys remember, the SVG was not in the beta, it was only available in the PC game files of the beta, so therefore it was a forcibly placed asset, and therefore was using the internal code name. For whatever reason, it was named Powerbolt. We probably won't ever know, but it was renamed to be the SVG-100 upon release of Black Ops 3. Now, of course, as we know right now, the full game and its launch, none of these weapons have been since changed in the naming style since then, but they definitely came from different origins, which is cool to take a look at. Now, the next thing I want to talk about actually deals with specialists once again. And this one deals with one specialist in particular, and one that you don't know of as of probably even the beta. I don't believe it made it that far. It was just in the early alpha stages of it. But Reaper's ability was not initially Psychosis. Instead, it actually switched off with what Prophet had, that being Glitch. So whenever you took a look at Black Ops 3 in the earliest builds for the alpha and everything like that, that some people, even some YouTubers got to play around with, the ability was actually Glitch available with Reaper. So whereas you'd have Scythe and then Glitch, you now have Scythe as well as Psychosis. which, may I add, Scythe has had a ton of changes since the beta version of the game, but nonetheless, the entire ability is completely different and something that was not allocated to what we see now as it was initially. So an interesting little change here, and of course that would have totally changed the dynamic of Black Ops 3 if it stayed as Glitch to Reaper and Psychosis probably to that of Prophet, but nonetheless, that's gonna move us over into the next one, that dealing with some perk replacements. And I say replacements as a loose term because it's not anything in which these perks that we have now changed out for something that was in a different position, like a different made perk and it was thrown out, but instead it's ones that flip-flopped back and forth. So as we know it now, there are tier 1, 2, and 3 perks, which each have different perks that are valuable to each slot. Personally, I think tier 3 is probably the most stacked category of all of them, in which you really have to pick and choose, but I digress. Sixth Sense is currently a tier 1 perk, and Blast Suppressor is a tier 3 perk. But upon the alpha version of the game, it was actually reversed. So Sixth Sense was a tier 3 perk and Blast Suppressor was a tier 1 perk, which would have completely changed the dynamic in the meta of the game because personally, I don't think Sixth Sense is that much of a crutch perk. So that would free up one of the slots that you'd have to probably really think about using in tier 3 and allow Blast Suppressor to be used all at the same time because tier 1 doesn't have all that many super perks if you want to put it that way. So definitely nice to see them readjusted here in that sense, but also I would have really liked to see them stay that way. So I guess that comes down to what you guys think. But the next thing I want to talk about actually deals with something everybody's been asking for years. We have no real explanation as to why it has been taken out, and that leads to a lot of speculation as to the series going downhill, whatever you may think about it, but that dealing with a player counter. In the early alpha versions of the game, which can be seen once again through some specialist promo material and everything like that, there actually is an online counter for how many players were online in the earlier builds of the game. Now, of course, it was fabricated because it was still in early development of the multiplayer and everything like that, and it listed a couple thousand players online, but nonetheless, it is something that it was still coded to be in there. We just never saw it come to the final product, which personally I'd love to see. I don't care if it showcases a little bit less or a little bit more, I just want to see how many people are online. I'm curious. Just something that piques my interest. So that's one thing that a lot of people have been wondering where this went for the past couple of years, and it was actually in Black Ops 3 at one point, just not now. And the next thing I want to mention is a little bit more of just an aesthetic design choice, and this actually deals with some HUD elements. And this being the ribbons that would pop up if somebody, say, captured a flag caught in a streak, did something like that. These were a little bit different. We have a little bit of that now, but the design model for this is a little bit different. It showcased the specialists they were using, the rank they were, and their calling card as well as what they ended up doing. Now, it's a little bit less than that. It doesn't showcase the rank, it doesn't showcase the specialists they're using. Instead, it just showcased the calling card with a little bit of a banner above saying, this is what they did. So it's something that was, I think, a little bit cooler. I like that one more so personally than what we have now. I think it's just a little bit nicer of a design and showcases a little bit more about the player for doing that kind of stuff, but that's personally just me. The next thing though is one that I absolutely loved about the earlier versions of Black Ops 3, and it predated the beta, so you wouldn't have been able to see this for yourself, but instead it deals with some of the earlier footage once again from the alpha and everything like that. If you were to go and take a look at the weapon pickup prompts that you can go around to weapons, it'll say press and hold square or X to pick up whatever weapon it is, whereas it's just text at this point, and even in the beta, in the earlier versions, it actually showcased a bit of the weapon itself. It showcased a little bit of a pickup preview and icon of that weapon so that if, say, you weren't necessarily familiar with what it was, it showcased what the weapon looked like right there on the indicator right before you picked it up. I personally think that was awesome. For what reason it was cut, we don't exactly know, but it was one thing that was a little bit more of a design element that I think is just more aesthetically pleasing. It could have something to do with what we'll talk about in a few seconds in terms of some shadowing and bugging out with that, but we don't know exactly. But the next thing I want to talk about and touch on are the medals. Medals are pretty vibrant within Black Ops 3, and of course, even moving forward into other titles like Infinite Warfare, Modern Warfare Remastered, World War II, we've gotten some cool things here and there, but what we saw in Black Ops 3 in the earlier builds of the game, and more specifically some of the alpha stuff that we saw teased to us via the trailers for the multiplayer reveals, some specialist stuff, some game mode trailers, that kind of stuff, it was really all bland and drab. They're more so less life-filled versions and more so just sharpened white and blue texture on every single one. Now, circling back a little bit to what we mentioned about maybe bugging out, this was actually something that was removed because it created some shadowing and glitching as of the developmental department, but this actually deals with how tablets were used to call in our streak, or rather the lack thereof of tablets. Whereas you pull out something for a Hellstorm missile that is like a standard tablet and everything like that, previously you would just hold up your hands and it would project from your wrists, playing into the DNI of the campaign and everything like that, the cybernetic augmentation. So it would literally display just from your wrists, which was a really cool feature, I think. But once again, because of some shadowing issues and everything like that, it did not really work out in the favor of how it could play out perfectly from a developmental standpoint. So therefore it was cut. We reverted back to a simple tablet that we pulled out like a lot of different titles that we've seen, but nonetheless, I think this one would have been really cool to pull out and pull off, but just did not happen. So that said, moving over into our final three now with this one, we're gonna talk really briefly on Safeguard for this one because it was one that Safeguard really hasn't changed all that much in terms of gameplay and everything since launch, but it was something since the beta we've had a couple of different changes, that being more so mostly to the time limit. That was something in which you could guarantee a 20-minute game if you ended up forcing overtime. While there is in place a little bit of a patch that happened months and months ago at this point to have that time to beat added in, if you ended up forcing overtime in the beta, it would give you 5-minute halves both ways. So you would either win by winning both rounds or tie overall anyways. So regardless of the outcome though, you'd end up having 20 minutes of playtime, which really nullified a lot of pub stomping records, really allowed for some high kill gameplays, all that kind of stuff. It was just crazy to think about 20 minutes for one game mode. You could do a lot of damage, but nonetheless, that moves us over into one change in particular I really wish would have stayed on evac, because there was actually an entirely different corridor and hallway by B-Flag. Whereas you can jump up and kind of overlook that statue in the center of mid-map, that was actually the location of another hallway that led to the outside, leading towards the helipad. If you take a look at currently where the sheet is in front of a door on that little overlook in mid-map, that's actually the door that was the one in question that led to the outside. And on the outside, once again, you can totally see that there are some doors there that led into that inner hallway, but that's something that was closed off for whatever reason, we don't know, but still, nonetheless, would have been a cool change to see stay. Now, the final thing that I want to mention with you guys here today about things that have changed deals, once again, going back to the alpha versions and some trailers that we saw. The MR6 actually previously had the same fire audio as of the Shiva. Now, whether or not that was something that was a little bit of a placeholder for audio, we don't know exactly, but still, when you heard the thing fire off, if you looked at it now, it'd be the same audio as the Shiva. So really interesting. Glad they changed it up though to give the Shiva and the MR6 a little bit more of a unique fire audio for each of them, but nonetheless, an interesting little change at that. So that said, that's gonna wrap it up. That's been 13 things that were different 2 years ago in Black Ops 3 and further compared to now. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. I'd love to hear your thoughts down there in the comment section down below. Firstly, how many of these did you guys actually end up remembering or getting right or knowing about at all? And how many of them took you by surprise? And additionally, if you guys would like to see more, I can totally detail some more changes and stuff here for you guys going forward. We don't have much time on Black Ops 3 left, so bear that in mind. But hopefully you guys enjoyed, and if you guys did, make sure you drop a like down below. And of course, if you guys are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe to stay up to date with everything we have here regarding Call of Duty Black Ops 3 for a little bit more time. Then we're moving over into World War II. So if any of that interests you, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a beat. And finally, if you guys want to follow me over on Twitter, that's the best place to get connected outside of YouTube. I practically live on Twitter. So if you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, link is down there in the description below. But that said, out of the way, hope you guys had a fantastic day. Thanks so much for watching. Mine is an espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.